Today I fucked up trying to talk dirty on a first date. Obligatory didn't happen today. Marking NSFW to be on the safe side. Several years ago me and my fiance were on our first date. It was my first date in a while, but things somehow went well despite how nervous I was. We eventually ended up going back to my place and it didn't take very long for the clothes to start coming off. This was the first time in maybe 2 years that I had sex, so I'm having a grand old time and am really getting into it, and this is where my fuck up begins. It's important to note that my fiance is of African descent, so I'm clinging on to him, and I still have no idea what possessed me to say this, but in the heat of the moment I whisper as loudly as I can into his ear, "This is the closest I've been to Africa." Now if you found that hilarious, you're not alone, because he immediately stopped the fun sexy time we were having and burst out laughing to the point of tears, while I'm laying beneath him completely mortified after realizing what I just said. The mood was completely ruined after that, on account I couldn't get him to stop laughing. But luckily for me he still wanted to see me again after that for whatever reason. Unfortunately for me though, I would soon come to realize that my fiance had a serious case of boomer humor, where once something is funny it stays funny forever and never gets old. Any chance he gets he says the phrase "this is the closest I've been to Africa" or some variation of it and never misses an opportunity to tell the story. Weddings, birthdays, baby showers, housewarming parties, D&D sessions, company Christmas parties, funerals, okay maybe not that last one, all are perfect opportunities to share how I had a brain fart during sex. Our anniversary was a few weeks ago and for a joke gift he got me one of those stupid shirts that have an arrow pointing to the side that says the infamous phrase "this is the closest I've been to Africa." He's tried bribing me several times to wear it out in public or at least take a picture with him on the side the arrow points to, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Makes for a nice lounging shirt though. Too long didn't read, I blurted out something stupid during sex and my fiance found it so hilarious he can't/won't stop until the entire world knows the story. At the risk of earning your ire, some good dick after a dry spell is what possessed you. I know I certainly can't control what comes out of my mouth during some good sex, dry spell or no. I'll never admit that. He'd be even more insufferably smug than he already is if he found out. Lol. Op's husband tells the story. Real life Redditor, oh SHT, I've heard this before. This is you. Op is now Reddit famous IRL. But did you bless his reins? I'll thank you to never say that again. That kind of humor is right up his alley. Lol. For a second I thought someone was telling my wife's favorite story of our first night together. She came to a party my roommate and I were hosting, then we headed out to a club from there. This was a hip-hop club and on this night she and I were the only white folk in the joint. So we're drunk and having a great time and tearing up the dance floor when I yell, so she can hear me, "This reminds me of being in Africa." What only she and I knew was that I had recently spent a month in Kenya with my brother where we were always the minority at the nightclubs. I'm not sure how I didn't get my ass kicked that night, but apparently my wife thought it was funny enough to keep me around, and here we are 16 years later. Can we get a petition started for Op to take a picture in the shirt? Today I fucked up by waxing my armpits with my GF wax strip. Tonight I, 22M, saw my GF, 25F, waxing her hands and legs for the first time with her waxing strips. She said that it didn't hurt at all, so I wanted to try. Wax strips have a pinkish color and you can split them into 2 pieces. After watching many people on the internet screamed for their soul when they waxed, I got intimidated by the idea of putting the wax strips on my body. However, after seeing my GF waxed her entire legs effortlessly, I decided to put one wax strip on my leg. It was not that hairy, but since I have never shave or trim it before, the amount of visible hair that I can see through the wax strip looked quite a lot. I pulled it off quickly and, surprisingly, it was not hurt at all. A few hours later, I have an idea of waxing my armpits since they are quite long and gross now. My sister walked in to see me, a 22 years old man, lying on the edge of the bed with both of my arms up, with 2 pink wax strips on my armpits, while my GF was laughing and taking photos of it. My sister decided to film the procedure for my mom to see. Little did she know that what happened next will be the most hilarious moment in waxing history. My GF pulled a strip on my left arm and it was hurt like hell. I looked over but the strip was still there. Turn out, my armpit hairs were too long and that wax strips only meant to use on arms or legs. The strip was too weak to pull my armpit hair off. It came back to where it was and left me with one of the worst pain in my armpit that I have ever experienced. My sister put a cold towel to cool the irritation but the strips still stuck on my armpits. I went to the shower and rinsed the wax strips off with hot water. But here is my nightmare, the wax residue couldn't be removed with hot water. My armpit hairs stuck together and start to twist themselves like a protein. Everything begins to stick onto my armpit skin which gives me the most unpleasant experience of gluing my own armpits. No matter how hard I rinsed, the wax wouldn't come off. My GF finally came to rescue with a razor. She decided to shave my entire armpit's hair off. Since I have to keep both of my arms up to prevent my armpits from sticking together, my GF has to help me with the shaving. 12 AM at night. I was naked in the shower with both of my arms up, while my GF shaving my armpits. It was really messy since the wax kept getting stuck on the razor, but we could finally remove most of the twisted hairs. The wax residue on my armpits was still there, so I tried a couple of methods that I found online. Alcohol burns my skin but did not remove the wax. Vaseline could only remove some of it, but the process of wiping it off gave my armpits some bad rash. And then, I found the savior of my armpits. It's olive oil. My sister was still there to film me applying olive oil to my armpits. The wax residue finally came off but left my armpits looked bumpy, irritated, with a couple of hairs stranded in the middle of the battlefield. Waxing? Never again. TL, doctor. I tried to wax my armpits with my GF wax strips but it was not strong enough to remove my hair. My GF has to help me shaved off my armpit hairs due to the wax residue gluing my hair together. My armpits became bumpy and irritated now. Update, here is how it looks like after 12 hours. My GF never had to remove the wax before so she didn't know that oil could help. Thanks for the advice but I won't wax myself ever again. Nothing wrong with using wax strips on your armpits but you must trim before waxing otherwise it won't work hence your experience. Off. I've stopped shaving down to the skin for sensitive bits, just taking a buzzer to make the hair as short as possible. I can't imagine the roughness of wax. Yep, buzzer all the way. I have to admit I don't trim it as short as possible though. Hair in those places is to aid with friction as well so I always leave a little bit, like 5 millimeters or something. Looks nice, better than unkempt anyway. Decreases armpit smell when sweating and still functions to relieve friction when working out so no irritation of the skin. Win all around. You have to trim them first. You can't just go right in. You have to trim it down first, or this happens. As soon as Op said their underarm hair was long and gross I knew where this was going. Always read the directions. Any box of waxing strips will warn against using them on hair longer than a half an inch or so. And for obvious, to me, anyway, reasons. I'm a woman and I use those wax strips. You only put them on your armpit once then never again. For future reference oil gets that was off. I'm a bit surprised your GF didn't tell you. Those strips usually come with a napkin/wet wipe package that has oil on it. Your balls next please. That's like putting tape on a bin bag. Today I fucked up by marrying a sociopath who faked having cancer and then divorced them. Like most today I fucked ups, this story actually happened in the past and I'm on a throwaway account to protect my anonymity. About 6 years ago, I was dating a girl who I had go to school with and reconnected with at a bar one night after blacking out from alcohol and marijuana. The start to any true love story. In our quest to escape reality, we really hit it off and started drinking and smoking pot pretty much every day and eventually got into the occasional harder drugs. This didn't seem like a problem at the time. Though we were both in the throes of substance dependency, it was easily ignored as socially acceptable. Fast forward a few years and everything seemed great. I had a great job, We had just moved into a nice apartment and we were deeply in love. She was my best friend and I saw us getting married and having a family one day. However, in the winter a few years ago, she gave me the devastating news that cancer from childhood had returned. It was heartbreaking to hear and I did everything I could to comfort her. I told her how I would take care of her and love her no matter what, and that we were going to beat it. I offered to go to her doctor appointments, give her aids, buy whatever she needed and do what any good partner would do. But things seemed off from the get-go. While she was always getting sick from chemo, anytime I tried to take off work to go to a doctor's appointment, the appointment would get changed at the last minute. Or something else would pop up, like a UTI or injury that would require going to the ER. I can't tell you how many days I spent with her waiting in ERs or taking her to doctor's appointments at various hospitals. I even picked her up at Dana-Farber about 10 times after supposed doctor appointments. The odd part was, whenever I was able to be there, doctors would always ask me to leave the room before speaking with her, which I didn't see as odd at the time. That gave her the cover she needed to keep the ruse going. I figured most of her sicknesses that popped up were related to the chemo. After all, she was losing lots of weight, was very sickly and throwing up daily. She also was able to answer most of my questions related to her treatment. Being an idiot and because I wanted her to know that I was in it for the long haul, I eventually proposed to her. And that fall we had an amazing wedding. Over 100 of our closest friends and family. About her day I fucked up a fall day and one of the happiest days of my life. Her uncle, a lawyer, officiated for us and I was happy to call her my wife. The odd part was, I never signed the forms to get the marriage certificate because she was taking care of it and her uncle who married us and was supposedly helping to expedite it. But a few weeks late, the marriage certificate never arrived. I asked about it, and it was always in the mail. I found that odd, but bought the lie hook, line and sinker for the next few months. All the while, her illness would get better, then get worse, then get better. At this point, I was paying for everything, and she was down to working part-time according to her. I even gave her money to pay off her supposed medical bills. But then one day I saw her drinking while supposedly on chemotherapy medication and I realized that something was seriously wrong. I decided I had to confront her and I needed to hear about her illness from a doctor's mouth without her filtering it, because any time I brought up the doctors, she would get mad at me for being so incessant. In trying to get that appointment, she was able to delay the inevitable for a few more months, until I physically took her to her hospital and stood there as she asked to speak with her doctor. Shortly after, a doctor brought us to a room where she came clean about not having cancer and proceeded to have a mental breakdown and was institutionalized. I'll never forget how it felt sitting in the room as the lies of the past few years crumbled before me. It was the most pain I ever felt in my life and was like the past few years of my life were a complete lie. I should have ended it there, but stupidly I didn't. I decided to try to help her still through her actual illness, which had components of schizophrenia and bulimia. If I had to guess, I'd say it also had a component of being a sociopath, but I'm no psychologist. Anyway, she got out of the hospital after a few days and then went into an inpatient treatment, then outpatient, and then back and forth a few times over the next few months. Anyone that has ever dealt with bulimia knows it's a very hard to treat disease, and I had shrugged off all of her abuse and lies as being related to the bulimia. Eventually, when she was stable, we started planning to move to New Hampshire because her new job was in New Hampshire. Being the fool I was, I found a new job myself in New Hampshire. My first day I was let out early, and when I got home I found her drunk on the couch and surprised as ever to see me seeing her. Even with empty bottles around, she denied any responsibility and started getting mad at me. It was at that moment I knew there was nothing I could do. I finally kicked her out and started looking into a divorce. Problem was, I never got my marriage certificate. She eventually told me that the paperwork was never done and our marriage wasn't legal. Not believing her at this point, I literally ran a background check on myself to be sure she was actually telling the truth, which is odd because her uncle the lawyer married us. Thankfully it was the easiest divorce in history. Though I was fooled, I don't regret trying to be a good boyfriend and husband. I haven't seen her since the day I kicked her out, but but I hope she eventually got the help she needed fighting her demons. I'm glad I was able to get help fighting mine, as the experience really messed me up for some time. I'm happy to say my life is so much better now. I'm in a loving relationship with someone who is trustworthy, and I haven't touched any drugs in over a year. I wish I didn't go through what I did, but I'm glad I made it out the other side. Frankly, I wouldn't believe this story if it didn't happen to me. But that's okay. I feel like I made it through hell and back, and it made me stronger and much wiser. She was never held responsible for her abuse and theft, but I will leave that up to universe to work out. I'm just grateful to be free. My only relationship advice is that it is okay to trust, but don't be a blind fool and deny reality, especially when faced with overwhelming evidence. Too long didn't read, married a sociopath who faked having cancer and then divorced her. This is a dodo. Today I fucked up. I thought any actually interesting today I fucked ups were extinct. Congratulations on your sobriety. That's a tough battle to fight, let alone win. Yeah, I messed up big time lol. But thank you. I'll always be an addict, but I never have to be a using addict again. Far better than my friend that married a druggie and never even questioned that the paperwork they signed was turned in. It wasn't, and they were living in her parents' old house. He paid for and took wonderful care of her mother till she passed, then did a full upgrade on the entire house. She died while he was out of state for work, thankfully with his work stuff since it was a long project, and her kids told him that he couldn't come back, and they were never married and that everything in the house belonged to them. He got an attorney so he could go retrieve what he did have at the house. But it was all gone, including his mother's watch. And the kids cremated her before he made it home 2 days after her death. All he had was what was in his truck. Wow, that is beyond fucked up. I hope your friend is doing better now. I believe your story completely because I've seen it happen. I used to be friends with a guy named Adrian, his real name, because fuck that guy. Adrian lied for years about having a rare form of cancer. He seemed sweet and genuine and very matter of fact. He claimed to be constantly in and out of the hospital. He claimed one of our friends who worked at the hospital had treated him there, and claimed another friend who was a lawyer had helped him to write his will. He would ask for rides to the ER from friends and then sneak out of the hospital and walk home. When people tried to check on him in the hospital, he claimed he couldn't answer his phone because the service was spotty. He manipulated multiple girlfriends into believing his story and gaslit the shit out of them whenever they started asking questions. Worst of all, he claimed radiation had made him sterile, so he kept trying to persuade these women to have sex without protection. If ever a girlfriend tried to break up with him, he used his imminent death to manipulate them into staying with him. When the truth finally came out, I was so hurt and shocked. Listening to one of his ex-girlfriends explain her experiences was one of the worst things I've ever heard. I know someone I'd like to set him up with. For my ex-wife it was a traumatic brain injury, not cancer, and sadly our marriage was legit and the divorce was miserable. But other than that, you pretty much just told my life story. I'm so sorry you had to go through this too. I hope you are on an upswing now, bud. What a hard story. Fortunately you found a new, real love. It was quite the roller coaster. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I'm very happy to be alive today.